So, let's start from the beginning.
Well, we matched on Tinder, and at the beginning, we were hitting it off. You know, things were going well, so I figured we could maybe meet in person. Set things up. We were gonna meet in front of some Italian joint, grab a bite, maybe walk around a little. I was waiting around for just like a little while, and then she tapped me on the shoulder, and she was like super cute, like mad cute. Like I was so excited, and she's like, "It's so nice to meet you," and she hugged me, and then like I asked her if she found the place okay, basic stuff, and she said something like, "Oh yeah, no trouble at all," and then we went into the diner. And we walked to a booth near the back, and the waiter comes over with our menus. He says something like, "Oh, take your time. I'll be back in a jiffy to get your order, okay?" And I'm like, okay, this place is barely Olive Garden. It's not that deep of stuff. And then we're like sitting down. We're like chilling. Things are getting started, and she starts checking her watch. And I'm like, "You got someplace to be?" And she said, "What? Me? No, I'm fine right here. I'm just wondering where she is." And I'm about to ask, like, "What are you talking about?" When Beth just jumps out of her chair and she goes, "You made it. Hi, Mom." And I'm watching all this while it's happening, and my jaw is like on the floor. I'm wondering what is going on. And her mom just starts in on me saying shit like, "Oh, Josh, it's so nice to finally meet you. Listen, I do just have some questions before we start. I heard you have a peanut allergy, and I just want to know, like, how severe is that? Like, stop breathing kind of thing? Like, and I heard your mom and dad are divorced. So how exactly do your Christmases work? Is that going to be a problem in the future?" It's not even finalized yet. "Well, how about we start with this? Where were you born and at what time?" And then she just fucking sits there smiling at me. And I'm just staring at her because what exactly am I supposed to say? Thankfully, the waiter comes and asks if we're ready, and we look down at our menus, and I think Beth and I like order a Coke, and her mom gets like a top shelf margarita or a sangria or like a fucking Mike's Hard with a salt rim or something. And anyway, then she gets up and she goes, "I'll be right back, you two. Don't go anywhere." And we're finally alone. And I look at Beth, and I'm like, "Yo, this is weird, but I really like you." And then her frickin' mom comes out of nowhere, dragging this poor old man. And I'm like, "Who the hell is this?" And her mom's all like, "This is Grandpa Dennis. Grandpa Dennis, say hi." And Dennis is like, "Oh, pleased to meet you." And he's like, "Oh, did you ask him about the peanut allergy?" And then he makes himself all comfortable or dies or something at the end of the table. And I'm like, "Sorry, what's going on here? I'm here to be with Beth on a date." And I'm sorry, one second, honey, let's put a pin in that. And her mom completely interrupts me and is now somehow in the middle of a phone call. Hello, Cheryl? Can you hear me? Yes, Cheryl, Josh is here. Do you want me to say hi? Okay, all right, I'll just prop you up. And I'm like, "Who is that?" And she's like, "This is Aunt Cheryl. And connection's kind of laggy, so be patient." And at this point, I'm done. I've had it up to here. So I'm like, "Listen, it's been a pleasure to meet all of you, but this was not what I was expecting at all. I'm trying to get to know Beth. Do you want to step outside? We can drive around a little in the car or something." And so we both get up to leave. And then I hear her mom yelling after us. She's like, "Wait, slow down, I'm coming! Shotgun!" And we all left.
Yeah, I can see how that was a frustrating experience for you.
It was 2 weeks ago, and it's still hard.
And how do you feel about that?
It's not even finalized yet.